Hi, my lovelies. This is Tabby here from tabby's.ca, and today I have Keith Busher from Precious Mutations. Hi, Keith. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm actually really excited to be back, and I can't wait to talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate you allowing me to delay a little bit because I know we were supposed to talk a little while ago, but it's been a crazy spring, I think, for a lot of people, but me in particular. So, yeah, no, I'm very excited to be sitting here and chatting with you.
Well, thank you for coming too. And it actually worked out best for me that we had a little bit of a delay, so we're good. We're all good.
The
So
universe.
it's true. The universe does know. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. My name is Keith Busher, and I am the artist behind probably what I'm best known for is the Precious Mutations. Precious Mutations was a project I started about 10 years ago, which was just trying to find something, a fun craft idea, something to do with my kids so that they'd spend less time watching TV. I was inspired by David Irvine, who I know you've had on the show before, um, about using recycled materials to create art and find new things and be cost effective, really. So we went looking for something to do that wasn't going to be ripping David off completely. And what I found was countless tchotchkes, figurines, stuff that your grandparents collected and let you look at but never touch. Sat on the shelf forever and ever. They were priceless heirlooms, and um, but there were so many of them at like thrift shops and garage sales and the dump, the dump store or whatever. And so I was like, some of these are pretty quirky and weird and could be very easily altered into something more unique, something more for the times, something more collectible for the next generation than somebody picking apples or sitting on a fence and those sorts of things. So we brought a couple of those home, mutated a couple of those. I call it mutating. Um, I believe David calls it redirecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I called it mutating because the first one was a zombie. And then there were a few other pieces, and I posted them online, and people got a kick out of them. So I was like, all right, I'll just, you know, I'll brighten some people's days by throwing these up every now and again. And it took off. Like at first, it was just a little bit of people who followed along and laughed and made comments and stuff like that. And then it just kept growing and kept growing. And I had fun doing it. And I really enjoyed it. So I just kept doing it. Since then, I did a show with David Irvine, I think in 2014. Um, since then, I've evolved. I've been sculpting all kinds of different things. I got a job working. Uh, I'm a carpenter, so I got a job working at a place that made theater sets, and I met a friend named Nick Martin there, and him and I hit it off and started making things. We started going to Comic Cons and stuff like that. So we built a zombie foosball table that we took to these Comic
Oh,
Cons and shows. We built like a big tabletop version of a Hungry Hungry Hippos games that was based on the Alien movies. So you tilted
oh,
the heads back and the little tiny mouths came out to get the marbles and stuff like that. We
no.
made a lot of really strange, weird things. And um, yeah, so I mean, I'm known for the precious mutations, but I also paint abstract paintings using firecrackers. Whatever kind of grabs my attention, whatever I haven't seen before, whenever I'm thinking of something, I like to say I work in hypotheticals. So it's like, I've never seen this before. I wonder if it could be done. Well, we'll find out. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it absolutely does not. So,
But even when it doesn't, you get to learn something to
absolutely.
apply.
You should always be challenging yourself, right? Like you should always be pushing your own limits. You should always be pushing. I I applaud people who can do the same thing over and over and over again, but I'm kind of like I get it out of my system and I have to move on. I have to be like, okay, I know what I learned from that. How can I push myself a little bit further? How can I make this a little more complicated? How can I take what I've learned and apply it to the next thing? And so it has to keep growing for me and has to keep getting more complicated, unfortunately, and much to the chagrin of people around me. But yeah, you should always, I think, be learning, growing, evolving.
I understand that one. I have a really hard time. I really struggle doing the same thing over and over again.
Mhm.
So like it's really like they tell you to do like product lines and stuff, but I struggle with doing the set product line, the exact same items again and again, and get to change the colors and stuff. It's hard. You want to do something completely different.
Yep. I started out, like, even before I started making mutations, I would paint the little tabletop figurines, but I never did it the way that they had them on the box. But I found that even that too limiting.
Yeah.
It was like you can only make the same character so many times before. Another challenge I had was, 1 year right after I started making the mutations, my wife brought home a box of ornament nutcrackers with the little mouths that move and everything,
Ah,
and we turned them into zombies. So we had a pack of like 5 or 6, and I just kind of painted them up and bloodied them up, and their teeth are showing. So that's always, that's the step that you don't even have to do. And I went to work. My daughter was like 4 at the time or 5 at the time and was like, "We can't put these on the Christmas tree." So I was like, "Okay." So I put them on Facebook or something and said, "Hey, my daughter says I can't put these on the tree. If anybody's interested, I don't know, like 15 bucks a piece or something."
yep.
And I went to work. I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have anything. I went to work for like 10 hours and I came back and I had like hundreds of orders for these, and I had 6. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with this now. So um, we went out and we looked for every kind of nutcracker that we could find, and still only ended up with like 100. Had to do draws to see who won the right to purchase a
Wow.
piece. It was kind of crazy and overwhelming. And I could have at that point, realistically, just ordered like a container full probably from overseas somewhere and
Yep.
just done that. But I can't, like, after you do for the next 3 or 4 years, whenever the nutcrackers came out, we would buy them and we would modify them. But after you get through about 50, you're like, I'm seriously starting to hate this because it's I like pleasing people and I like the joy it brings people, but there's only so many variants that you can do on them before it's just line work,
Yep.
right? Assembly line work, and that's I don't. I'm very much in my head, so I can't just sit there and shut everything else out and just do the same thing over and over and over again. So,
But if you're like me, you focus into what you're doing,
oh,
and then
100%.
once that's done, you've moved on to something else.
Yeah, you got it out of your system, and now you're like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next cool thing? But if you're just going eyeball, 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 eyeball,
Yeah.
eyeball, 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 you're like, oh my god, I can't do it anymore. So
And then you end up not doing a good job either, right? Because you're just like, I just didn't, I don't want to do this. Hurry up.
exactly, and that's not fair to the people who are buying your work, who are appreciating your work, right? You're like, you want to give them, at least I do. You want to give them your best, and you want to give them what you can do and what you're capable of, not something that you're doing begrudgingly. These are all lessons I learned throughout the whole process, but I even had people offer me and say, "Hey, we can get somebody overseas to do this all for you." And I couldn't, on principle, I couldn't do it. On principle, I was like, I can't be supporting slave labor somewhere to and then just sitting back and making money off of a concept or an idea. That just wouldn't fly for me. So,
I can understand that. And, you know, that's when you make a piece of you stays with it, right? So if someone else is making those pieces in an assembly line type setting, it would make it really difficult to have the same energy in the piece.
Exactly. And the fact that I wouldn't even be touching them, you know what I mean? That
Yeah,
it's
that
it,
would,
I don't know. I struggle a little bit. It would be great to find somebody who was like, hey, this person has some really cool ideas. Let's work with them to help actualize them um, legitimately, as opposed to somebody just saying, we can make $1 million off of this really quickly. Let's do it the cheapest way possible. So, I would still love to find that artistic sugar daddy that loves my brain and my idea, and it's like, we just want to put you in a room with a bunch of art supplies, come up with stuff, and then we'll take it from there and figure out how to market it or mass market it and those sorts of things. But
I think that's every artist's dream, though. You just like we all need artistic sugar daddies. Like, all right, you pay for the room, you bring me some food, baby, and I will make all day.
absolutely. But even if you did do that, don't you still feel like you'd be fighting all the time? Like, you'd be like, that's not what I meant. They'd make something for you and you'd be like, no, 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 that's not right. Get out of the way. Let me do it. I'll do it for you. And then, so yeah, no,
I can't even get my son to do dishes without me being like, ah, this is not right.
yeah, there's definitely that I have to have my part in it, my say in it. And these are all, as I'm learning, parts of neurodivergency and ADHD and autism and all these wonderful things that we as a society are learning about fast and feverishly now that we had no idea that we had when we were younger. But yeah, I always struggled working with others. Always, not in the sense that I was intolerable, but I drove people nuts because I was always like, why? Why do we do it that way? Why don't we do it this way? And constantly looking for ways to do it faster, do it quicker, smarter, more effectively. you know I would get so frustrated and so aggravated with people who would be like, this is the way we've always done it. I was like, oh, did you ride
Oh,
a
I
horse
don't
to
like
work today? Because we changed that a while ago and you seem to be all right with that. But
do your homework by candlelight.
exactly.
No, I get that. Yeah, I understand that. So this, like, how did you learn how to sculpt and stuff? Like, how did you become artistic?
I've always had an artistic family. So my aunts, my uncles, um, my parents to a degree. My brother has always been very artistic. So I've always been around the arts. Um, More of them are more classically trained and went to university and college and those sorts of things. I could never grasp illustration or painting. Maybe the perfectionist in me was just like, I can't get it to where I want it to be. I'm learning also it might have been ADHD. I couldn't keep my brain focused on what it was that I wanted to create long enough to get it from here to here. Um, so I don't know. I went through at the end of high school. I'm dating myself here. At the end of high school, I wanted to go to college for art, and my high school art teacher said, "You don't pursue the arts as a career." But which I held a grudge for that for a very long time, and I went out and I tried to be a normal person for 20 years, um, and and I held a grudge against her specifically for a very long time. But realistically, the choice was mine, and I've come to the realization that she wasn't really wrong because this was the early 90s. The internet had just come out, but it cost you like $10 for 30 minutes to spend on it. And it was like dial up, and nobody was using it, and nobody had even conceptualized art pages and using and monetizing it and all these things that we take for granted nowadays. So to her extent, she was probably like, you're going to go into an atmosphere that's graphic designers and very specific, and they're going to tell you what they want, and you're going to need to produce that, and you're too outside the box for that sort of thing. So I didn't. And yeah, so I spent a long time um, trying to be a normal person, trying to do the 9 to 5, trying to find a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, and did all those things. And it was when I brought those figurines home with my kids, that was when I was kind of like, I have this green putty that you used to use with the tabletop games. I said I'll try starting out with stuff like that, and just I did a few pieces and I was like, there's something here. And I didn't do any sculpting in high school. Like that wasn't one of our options. That wasn't like I took art every year. I took art in every fashion that I possibly could because I was so in love with it. But sculpting for some reason never came up. So when I discovered it, it was like, oh, okay, here's where my talent lies. I guess. I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm breaking my arm, patting myself on the back. Even now, I look at groups like Shiflet Brothers and stuff like that for resources, and I'm just blown away by what people can do. And then I look at my stuff, and I'm like, I'm terrible, but my idea is there, the concept is there, and I can do it. I can pass it off enough that it looks like what I'm trying to do, I guess.
Well,
Um,
and you're your biggest critic as well. Like that, nobody
Absolutely.
is as hard on you as you. Like I know I feel the same way a lot of the time. Like I love sculpting, and I don't understand why it's not in school. I think it's not fair. People are missing because sculpting is not the same as drawing and painting. Like
Mhm.
not by a long shot.
It's a lot more forgiving. Like clay, you can like if you screw it up, you just and like you mush it and start over again. You're like, okay, I'm gonna try this again. Or, um I don't know what it is about sculpting that it's just if it's getting my hands into it, if I don't like being dirty or goopy. I don't use traditional clays. I don't think I could because I don't like having wet hands. I don't like having slimy hands. I'm hyper paranoid about keeping it wet so it doesn't dry out. I'm terrified you're going to put it in the kiln and it's going to blow up. Um, and even like there's a lot of things that I haven't learned in 10 years. There's a lot of stuff that I basically people call me a cheater or whatever because I use somebody else's pre-existing thing as the basis. But those, to me, it's less about using them as bases. I built full caricatures before. It's more about I get inspired by those pieces and I just want to tweak them a little bit to make something weird and wacky and humorous. So, as for how I learned, a lot of it is just self-taught, trial and error, evolution. I would spend 3 months building figurines and going, I just can't get these. Am I allowed to swear?
That's up to you.
Oh, all right.
I don't.
I can't get these fucking noses right. Like, no matter what I do, these noses are just pissing me off. I won't swear excessively, but it's like when you get to that point where you're just frustrated, you're like, I've tried everything, I don't know what it is. And then I'll find that I go and look something up online and I'm like, how do you sculpt the nose? And then they pull it out and you're like, oh, it's something so simple. Why didn't I just look it up 3 months ago? But I'm like stubborn that way because to me, to learn, I'm one of the people that learns from doing, right?
Yep.
If I did put that on 3 months ago, somebody'd be like, this is how you sculpt the nose. And it'd be like in one ear and out the other. If I couldn't picture it, if I couldn't feel it, if I couldn't do it myself. It's not until I do something and I accomplish something that it hits home and I'm like, oh, okay, now it totally makes sense because I know how the whole thing comes together, as opposed to just somebody giving you a list of instructions. I have panic attacks when I see the lists of instructions. Um, Even those HelloFresh boxes, you get a, a thing in, and It's like, here's 6 pictures on how you put your meal together, and I'm like, go, geez, and I skip things, I jump over things, I'm looking for highlighted words, and it's just that I don't know, I just don't follow instructions that way. I end up making it by picking out keywords and going, the rest of it should just kind of make sense.
I do that kind of like with IKEA type stuff. Like you buy something, you have to put it together. My husband always rags on me because normally it's the husband that ignores the instructions, but I just
Yeah,
throw them aside, and my husband will be like, "Aren't these the instructions?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't need them. I got
yeah,
this."
yeah.
Even
That's me and my wife too. Is it's like, it's right here. I don't need it. It's obvious what it is, and then you're like, oh,
and it's
there
always
was
like
a
you should have known it, right?
she
Like
always did the same thing. There's that one little piece that's like, you needed to put this in before you did that, and now you have to go back 3 steps and take it all apart to put that one piece back in.
but if you try to do it all, like you have to do it. You have a process, right? Even if the process is 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you try. You always start with the instructions because you're like, okay, the first 2 or 3, and then you're like, okay, I got this. This makes sense now. I got this. And you get cocky, and that's when you get caught up in problems. And
Yeah, and you don't see C screw into D hole.
yeah, exactly. So, very long story to a short answer of, I was self-taught basically to do sculpting, just trial and error, and some learning books, picked up a few books, and just really concentrating and focusing on other people's works, and dissecting it and trying to go backwards from their finished product onto, how did you get here. A funny story is the little tabletop figurines, because I was all excited. I was like, I can't wait. I would love to build something. For some reason, I really focus on making things as small and as difficult as possible for myself. I don't know why I don't sculpt larger things where you're allowed to get details in, and you can get lots of, you have more space and room to work. I have to try and small scale it as much as I possibly can. And then I was watching an episode of, it was something with Adam Savage in it, and he was talking to the person who made the game pieces for the board game of Labyrinth. And I was like, I'm gonna learn so much about how to do this. I'm gonna watch this video. And then I found out that they build it like this fucking big, and then take all kinds of shots of it, and then 3D print it this small. And I was like, that's cheating. I was like, you fucking, that's not fair. It's not fair building it this big and then shrinking it down and getting somebody else to shrink it down. So yeah, no, that was, yeah. So that was when I stopped trying to make things this small, was when I learned that that's the trick to it. So
But it's still hard because like I don't know, like when I focus on something, usually it becomes smaller. I don't know if it's a, tunnel vision, but I
yeah,
I don't know. I know what you
yeah.
mean though.
These the I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say them by name, but I'm sure it's all right. The precious moments pieces that I do, like, a lot of it's very tricky because they do that. They have these pre-assembled pieces that they have, these pre-made molds of just heads and pieces, and they'll make the body and they'll position it, and then they'll put the head on, but they're all pre-made, they're painted, and then whatever. But trying to mold around where they've put stuff into some of these places where they're very close together, or it's really tricky, can be a challenge. Sometimes I'm like, break the head off, like, nobody's looking, chink, and take the head off, and sculpt it, and then try and figure out a way to glue it back on and mount it back on. So
I was curious because there are some pieces where it's like it looks like the head got smaller. Not by much, but just a little bit. Like the
um
um the Freddie Mercury one. So you started out with
yeah,
the laundry lady. Is her
yep.
head smaller?
I added the hair to be bigger. It wasn't a wig,
Okay.
so I added because in it he's got a very specific in the video for Break Free, he's got a very specific wig. And all the hair on all of these figurines is pretty much the same and flat and somewhat lifeless and very smooth. So when I want to do embellishments and stuff like that, the head might look smaller just because I put a larger hair piece on the head.
Okay.
Oftentimes I'm worried about the opposite, which is that because I'm sculpting right over an existing face, that I'm making faces that are too big and out of scale for the
Okay.
pieces. Um, which, when compared to Precious Moments pieces, they are, but because of the way that they scale their models and their figurines, then it doesn't look as bad. So
There's, I love Precious Moments. Like I grew up with Precious Moments, right? Like when I was a little girl, they gave me puzzles and coloring books, and I like Precious Moments. But
yep.
so the first time I seen your things, I was like, "The heck is this?" And
Yeah.
now I kind of love them. Like they're pretty funny. Like you have the one where they're the two halves of the horse.
Yes, conjunctivitis.
The look on the guy's face, like on the butt's face, when he, oh my gosh, I just died laughing. It was so funny.
And that one wasn't um that different from the original piece. Usually I try and kind of change it, but the person that was walking away was frustrated. One would assume because they had to be the butt,
Yeah.
but I'm sure whatever marketing meetings and stuff that they were doing was like, oh, they're just upset because they have to be the back end. And it was like, yeah, but why are you mad that you have to be the back end? You know, and it's something that everybody's ever thought of as like that two-part costume. You know, somebody is right in the danger zone constantly, and so yeah, I wanted to focus on the goopy eyes and the pink eye and the dry heaving and um, but yeah, that's
And the
um,
face on the horse's front end, that like, hey, hey, I got you.
yeah, like like when you know you're in trouble and you can't stop laughing about it, you're like, oh, that was really mean and it was really rude, but for whatever reason, I have a case of the giggles and I can't. You're trying to apologize and you're trying to say sorry, all the while you're killing yourself laughing and crying, and the other person just gets madder and madder. Yeah,
And then
I've been in
storms
that
away.
situation many times.
You've been that many times.
No, I just mean I've been that person who's like trying to apologize while laughing profusely, while laughing uncomfortably and uncontrollably.
My
I
middle
am
child was
sorry.
like that.
I'm genuinely sorry.
You just can't tell right now.
Exactly. And the madder you get, the funnier it gets. Like the more angry faces that you make, and the more trouble I'm in. I don't know how old you are. Do you remember the movie The Money Pit? Tom Hanks and Shelley Long. That'll probably.
I'm not. I'm terrible with names of
Oh, that's okay.
movies and music. Like, but I'm
It's
30.
an
I'll be 39 and
old. It's a early '80s movie,
yeah.
and they're filling the bathtub. They bought this house that's just derelict, and they bought it. It looks beautiful, but then they move in and they start trying to do renovations, and the whole house is just falling apart. So they're trying to relax. So they're filling the bathtub, and as they're filling the bathtub, it just falls through the floor and shatters on the ground floor, and just water everywhere. And the shot is looking up from the ground floor at Tom Hanks and Shelley Long looking through this hole, and he just
Oh,
starts laughing like that uncontrollable, I'm so angry, just what else could go wrong laugh. And if you ever get a chance on YouTube, look it up because it's entertaining and it's so incredibly well done.
I will because I like Tom Hanks, so I
Yeah,
will
he's
definitely
great.
Money Pit. Money Pit. I
That's
will
in
look
that
that up.
that's in that Splash era. that movie
Okay.
Splat around that time.
Yeah, right. I'm terrible for forgetting things. I
Oh
have
no
to
worries.
write everything down, and the older I get, the worse it is. So you
The
said
older,
you started. Sorry.
the older I get, the less my movie references hit. Like I say things to people and everybody's like, "What?" Or just completely, they just think I'm mental and completely out of left field because I'll say something and they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" Anyway,
I like obscure things sometimes, so I get that even in time, like
yeah,
because people are like, "I've never seen that." I'm like, "But it's not even that old. It's just you
yeah.
guys are weird."
I have my heartbreaking moment was I brought in the movie Poltergeist to show some people once, and
I
they were
love
like,
Poltergeist.
"What is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Poltergeist." And they were like, "What is Poltergeist?" And I was like, "Ouch, guys, ouch,
That's
seriously."
really bad.
That was like, I could understand you saying, "Oh, Poltergeist, I'd never seen it," but you guys are like, "I never even heard of it," and that was like a dagger to my heart. I think I aged like 15 years that day.
Adult children will make you feel old, really old. My 20-year-old will say stuff to me, and I'm like, "Did you seriously just say
Yeah, I'm 20 and 21. That's yeah.
that?" We had a surprise baby, so I'm 20, 17, and 5.
Wowzers,
Yeah,
that's
it's
fun.
my yeah. Well, it is fun. It is fun. But talking about kids, you started your kids. Like you started doing this because you wanted your kids to do less TV, like watch less TV.
Yep.
Did it work?
No, I watch less TV, but no, and they've grown up appreciating art and music and those sorts of things, but it wasn't something that they gravitated to. No, um, they're smack dab in the middle of that whole generation of i iPods before iPhones and all these things, and every kid had one and all those sorts of things, and we resisted for as long as we could without ostracizing them, right? Like you don't want to be the
Yep.
one kid in your class that doesn't have something when everybody else does. If everybody else is not looking at anybody else, they're just looking at their screen and you're the only one sitting there looking at everybody not looking at you, that's pretty hard. If everybody's able to communicate and share things back and forth and you're completely out of the loop, that's very difficult. So as much as we didn't want that to happen, and as much as we could see the writing on the wall of what was doing, it was like, how do you manage that? How do you, um, you know, how do you
It's a
explain that to somebody who's in like grade 6? Um,
it's a really hard thing to navigate, and they can't understand the ramifications. Even we don't know. Like
yeah,
the science is still out on that.
and I'm just as hooked on, the phone, using as an artist, using my phone, using the internet to communicate. Here we are,
Yeah.
talking to uh, people who are reaching out to ask me about my art, people who are looking to purchase my art, ways of sharing my art. I spent years, and I still am, trying to find an avenue that I fit in. Um, I went to markets, craft markets and art markets and those sorts of things. And I was successful at some of them. In Toronto, they have one called the Bazaar that I always did really well at. There's a group of shows that pop up in every city called punk rock flea markets that I do really well at, um, depending on the city. Um,
Yeah.
I tried doing Comic Cons, but it wasn't necessarily my avenue because I didn't always do pop culture pieces. Sometimes they were just weird. And my price point was a little higher than generally people wanted to spend after they paid whatever to get in and got $300 worth of autographs.
Yeah.
I would have people who came up to me with like a bag, $200 worth of Funko Pops, and tell me that my work, which is one of a kind, was too expensive. And it was like, okay, not for you. You
Yeah.
know, you could smile. Everybody, I'm not gonna make somebody purchase my art. I'm not gonna try and convince somebody to purchase my art. If you don't see the value in it, then 6 weeks from now when I'm not there and you maybe have buyer's remorse, then you're just gonna end up putting my piece in a thrift shop or something the same way I found it. So I would prefer that people found me naturally, that people gravitated to pieces that they like, that they very much like, and can't live without. And I know those people will cherish those. And I'm not saying necessarily I like it because they collect them, but it's not Beanie Babies and Funkos and baseball cards in the sense of I'm going to collect all these now and spend all my money on it now, because in 50 years I'll be able to retire with my when I sell my collection. Because I think we have a track history now that doesn't work. I'm seeing posts now, whether they're real or not, because social media, who knows? But Funko Pop dumping $30 million worth of overstock into garbage because nobody's buying them because they overestimated how popular the pieces were going to be. So that's plastic that's going straight into the garbage. They could be given. I don't know if there's any truth to that. I do know that the pieces that I modify, again, I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, um, are not coming back. They're not for the generation that's out now. And there are still people who collect them. There are still people who love them, and there are still people who like them. But the value on them has dropped substantially, and people don't know what to do with them, so they're getting rid of them. But they're made out of a specific clay called like a bisque or something,
Yep.
and that there is zero organic material in it.
Oh,
So they will never, ever, ever break down. So when aliens discover our planet in 2 million years, long after we're gone, they're gonna think we had teardrop eyes and giant heads, and we were super crazy religious and did all these things. And
and
um,
every girl had a bow.
exactly, and that it was just our whole existence. How did we fall apart? Because our whole existence was just love and cherish and happiness. And um, but the people who collect my work, I mean, maybe they think it's going to be worth a bunch someday, and I really hope it is. But it's not because it's a collector's item. It's because it's one of a kind. It's because it came from an artist as opposed to an artist made something and then it just got mass produced in a manufacturing plant and sent out. So um, I warned you I ramble, but this is exactly, to me, it's a symbolism of, it's an example of like somebody invented the chicken McNugget. But do you think that person is a bajillionaire right now? Like, think
No.
about how many chicken McNuggets got eaten and consumed and every day. And it's not like this person gets a royalty on every chicken nugget sold. He probably sold this recipe for like $250,000 and was like, woohoo, windfall. And McDonald's has made billions upon billions of dollars selling these things. And I think some of those things like Barbie dolls and stuff like that, not to pick on anybody in particular, is the same thing. Is that there's these incredible artists behind the manufacturing of these toys, but they all get put under one umbrella of distributed by Hasbro or Mattel or something, and the artist who created these the Kenner Star Wars dolls that are worth millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever it is. Could you tell me one person who made the original Luke Skywalker, the original Boba Fett? So there's some amazing artists out there who just don't get the recognition that they deserve.
That's true. And the artists that don't get that recognition that are working for different large companies, I feel like they are thankful to be getting paid.
Yep.
They're not looking at it from that type of standpoint. Whereas we should give more merit to the people that
Mhm.
actually do it, and it's hard because people don't understand. They don't see the art. Like art's all around us and every single thing we have and we do and stuff. But artists, because they're fundamentally so different than marketers, businessmen and stuff, it's harder for them to kind of um, say their piece and get what they really deserve out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things even now. Um, I how do you we were joking earlier that, it would be lovely to have an artistic sugar daddy who was just like, give me your ideas and I'll run with it. But realistically, if that person is a financier, then that person is like, I own this piece of art. So I need to get my money back off of what I gave you. It's so frustrating because there's so many things that we see and we're like, give the credit to the artist. So many things that we see where, and I'll try and pull out. And you see a lot of people who mimic other artists or take their ideas and sell them to a corporation, and because they have that middleman, they don't. The original artist who came up with the idea gets totally left out in the cold, right? Because they had principles and they were like, no, I'm not going to sell it to uh, a major corporation or whatever. But somebody else will be like, okay, I'll take your idea, I'll change it slightly, and I'll do it because I don't have those scruples. And then the original artist who inspired the whole thing is. Um, so to give you a personal example from my standpoint, um, and I know I'm not the first, and I know it's not original or anything like that, but me and my friend Nick, we made the zombie foosball table. So
Which
that
sounds
was,
so cool. I still want to see this thing.
um, I still have it because it's big and it's heavy and it's very expensive because it was a lot of work, and we took it around to Comic Cons and got it signed by a ton of horror people, and like even like George Romero, Bruce Campbell, lots of
Oh,
Michael Rooker. Sorry, I'm just brain farting when I try and think of specifics. But we built this thing and we took it around. We built it. We did it. We were doing a show, and George Romero was going to be there, and we were like, let's do an homage to zombie films. So we built this zombie foosball table, and he rebuilt all the legs out of metal, saw blades, turnbuckles, chain link. He built we built he built like an aluminum cage that went around the top that looked like a fence, so it looked like they were all trapped within the playing field. And I
oh,
sculpted 26 original figures. I shaved down all the foosball characters and sculpted little tiny sculptures of 26 foosball characters that look like people from zombie movies that people know and love. And it took us like 6 months on top of our job, so every night, waking hours, weekends, building this thing. And we built it and we took it and it was a big hit and lots of people loved it. Lots of people took pictures of it. Didn't really take off though because nobody tagged us in any of the pictures as people do. We took it around.
yeah.
We did what we could. We got a bit of notoriety. But then fast forward to, I want to say 2020, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe a little bit earlier. But suddenly when the World Cup was on, NASA, some guy was building a table with the likeness of all the US female soccer team.
Okay.
And they went and they got pictures of all of the members of the female US national team and had NASA,
Yep.
not the Bahamas, 3D sculpt all their characters. And they got so much news coverage, and they promoted it as like the first of its kind
What?
original. Yeah, and all I could think of was somewhere somebody, like, to me, I was like, number one, that's not the first of its kind, and I'm not saying that I was the first of the kind because I can't verify that, but all you have to do is look up foosball tables, and you would know that you're not the first one that made a bunch of look-alike characters to go on a foosball table. But for me, it was, I have this snaking suspicions that I can't prove, that somebody saw our foosball table and was like, I'm going to pitch this as my idea, but we'll change it so that somebody doesn't have to sculpt all these characters or whatever. We can use 3D printing. We can get somebody else involved, and I can charge somebody $150,000 for this great idea that I've had, and they'll build this for me, and I don't even have to do anything. I don't even have to have any artistic talent. I'm just going to tell them what I think they should do, and they'll build it. And there was all this news and all this press and everybody talking about this foosball table, and me and Nick were left sitting there going, it's got a lot of similarities, you know, but because we don't have that chain where I can say this person saw it, told this person sold the idea, and
Yeah.
that's the way the world goes, right?
Yeah. You can only, it only matters if you can prove it, right? It's,
Exactly. So yeah, that's where I say it gets a little dark sometimes, because it's what's original. People have asked me, what's original art? I don't know. I don't. There's so many people and so many different techniques and so many different ideas and concepts, that who's to say who's original and who isn't, and who was the first. It's all coming so fast and furious, and everybody's so sharing things. And even I've caught myself where I'm like, oh, I'm making this great new idea, and then I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed and I'm like, oh, I must have noticed this as I was going through, because here's this person doing it, and that's probably why I was inspired to do it, even though, so now I won't do that because I know it's not my idea. You ever get that where it's like somebody says something to you and it doesn't clue in until like 2 weeks later, and you're like, hey, you know what would be a really good idea?
yeah.
Yeah. My wife's
Yeah.
great at pointing that out for me. Hey, you know what would be a really good idea? Yeah, it was a great idea 2 weeks ago when I mentioned that to you. Yeah, exactly. So,
I literally say things to my husband in the hopes that in the future he'll kind of like remember it, you know. So when
plant
I
the seed.
mention it again, he's like, "Hey, that kind of sounds vaguely familiar." I'm like, "Yeah, you weren't listening to me last
Somebody else
time."
told me that. It was probably a good idea.
Yeah. No, but it is, and it's a really kind of tricky discussion too, because like, where does a technique end and a style begin? So like a
Yep.
technique would be universal. Everyone uses the technique to create something. But when does it stop being a technique and start being this person's style? Like it's
Yeah.
such a like a it's a hard thing to navigate.
Yeah. And then I've never, um, I know some people who get upset when they feel like they're being plagiarized or they're being, and I've stood up for even people like David, where I've seen people who are doing things. I know that David is not the only one who's doing redirected paintings. Do I know that David was the very first person that did redirected paintings? No, I don't know that. I believe he was, but I'm not 100% sure. Um, but there was one person that I came across, and it was like, these are not just doing what David's doing. The paintings are using the same subject matter that Dave uses. And then I called him out on it. And all I said was, look, I'm sure David is perfectly fine with you doing this because he's a super nice guy, but you should probably give credit to him for inspiring you, because you wouldn't be making these or selling these if you hadn't seen him do it. And he wanted to swear up and down that all his pieces were original ideas. And so I started pulling them, going like, this one here that you painted looks exactly like this one, which hangs in my brother's house. This one looks like this one. This one is this one. Like, I could one for one show you all the ones, right? Like, they weren't even thinly veiled attempts at plagiarizing. And he got all defensive, and David was like, don't worry about it. Because David's a super nice guy. And I learn a lot from David. And I see a lot of people who are redoing figurines and stuff like that. And and even when mine gets shared, there's a lot of comments who are like, I can't wait to do this, or I'm going out and buying all this stuff, or why would I pay that when I could just do this myself? And you know what? I just take it as I've inspired somebody to be creative, and I don't care, right? Like to me, I tried to do a how-to channel for a little bit, and people were like, "You're just giving away your secrets." And I'm like, if we have people creating and sparking up those parts of their brain that make them create something new and beautiful and interesting, I don't know that I've ever been referred to as making something beautiful, but um,
It's beautifully grotesque.
um, but the if people are out there trying things and experimenting and pushing their limits, then I've succeeded as far as I'm concerned. Because David was able to do that for me, was able to pull me out of whatever I was doom scrolling or whatever I was doing at the time and apply my time to making something creative, doing something that I think that I hope will make people smile and laugh and brighten their day a little bit. And if more people stopped sitting in front of television watching, now I'm going to sound biased, but if people are gonna stop watching grown men make millions of dollars for playing a game and instead go out and be inspired to do something and create something and put something into the world instead of just giving money to this mass marketing corporate machine, then that's awesome. You know, break away from the hypnotizing media machine that pulls you in, and you get home from work and you sit down for 6 hours and just watch TV and movies until you go to bed, and then you get up and do the whole same thing next day. That's
Yeah, and
not.
I think there's a growth that happens in people when they create. Like there's something there, like you better understand yourself when you get
Hmm.
this stuff out, and you could kind of see your progress, like not just as an artist but as a person. Like
Yep.
you change over time and your art changes with you.
Hmm.
And so like watching people kind of start creating and stuff, they learn about themselves through these
Hmm.
processes, whatever it is, whether they're crocheting or painting or sculpting, it's all a journey.
It's art is very meditative. Like once you get into it, you're putting on music that you find calming and settling. You are focusing
Well,
yourself. You're breaking those cycles in your head that are going around, going, I got to get milk. I got to do this. I have to do that. This is coming up. I'm worried about this. And you just allow yourself to just kind of be in your own personal space in an otherwise very crowded planet. And even if it's just for an hour a day, it's super healthy, I think anyway. And
no,
it saddens me that in times of inflation and recession and stuff, that art is oftentimes the thing that takes the hit first. Is it's like it's seen as an expenditure, it's seen as a, oh, I don't really need art, so I'll save that money that I was going to spend on this painting that I really like or something. And and that hurts everybody. I was super it sounds really strange, but I opened my art gallery in 2020, and everybody was like, what are you doing? And they weren't wrong. Because obviously here we are, 2023, I just closed the gallery. But it wasn't so much about I'm opening a gallery to make money. I opened the gallery because, um, to me, when you look back at some of the hardest times that people had, so like the Vietnam War and the World Wars and these other major life situations that have happened, some of the greatest music and some of the greatest art has come from those times. So I was like, I want to open this art gallery because I want people to, because I can't wait to see what comes out of this. When people are anxious, I want to be at the forefront when the art that is people's emotions around the pandemic and the anxiety of basically the world stopping just dead one day. And I wanted to see what was going to come from that and what was going to emerge from that. And we saw a ton of people who were super excited that we were there because we tried to open up like a community art space, which was where somebody could just come and create and or just talk
Yeah.
or just be surrounded by art. They didn't even have to make art. It was just like, here's somewhere you can go and it's not connected to the outside world and you can just disappear in the space for a little while. And and we can just talk or not talk and we can talk about what you want to talk about. And now I'm looking at it and I'm sad that I have to close because we connected with so many people. And one of the communities that we connected with that I wasn't expecting, but has become near and dear and true to my heart, is the LGBT and trans community, particularly in younger people, because there are a lot of people who aren't allowed to create or express themselves in their house. There are a lot of people who are under the thumb of who are terrified, who are not sure that they can trust coming out to their parents or expressing how they feel or who they are for being shunned or and we gave a space where we like I don't it to me I don't want to say I don't care what you make, but I want to encourage whatever it is that you choose to make because it's about making it. It's not about whether it's a masterpiece. It's not whether you can sell it for $5,000. It's that you feel safe enough and comfortable enough here or anywhere that you can express yourself and not have to worry about self editing or self like I can't add that part of the painting because that will upset somebody close by or they'll get mad at me or I'll get grounded or whatever. So, that was one of the things that that I'm very sad about. But we made tons of friends and tons of connections in all kinds of different communities just by being an open, safe art space for people. And while I'm sad to lose a spot that was available to those people, I'm happy because being tied there for 3 years meant I couldn't go out and see these things and experience these things for myself because it was just me and my wife that worked there, and she worked in her half and I worked in my half. And it was just like, I want to go and be part of these communities and part of these events, these that's going on and the change in the world and support these people outside of the place so they can see that there are people out there who are working with them and lifting them up and trying to be advocates for these people. So yeah, so I'm looking very much forward to being able to kind of go out and experience a little more firsthand. But yeah, no, I love creativity in all its forms, and I think it's so important to mental health. I think it's so important to physical health. I think it's so important to the advancement of society. I think it's so important for communication, and I'm just here to be an advocate for as much of it as I possibly can.
No, and I completely agree. I actually have a trans child, and she actually created the ditty I have at the beginning and end of my show. So I
Huh.
am very thankful for her. So, but
My son is also
it
trans, and he created the logo for Precious Mutations for me. So it's a
oh
little skull
really?
that looks like I don't know if I have it here, unfortunately, but it's like a little skull that looks like if you took one of these figurines and it had a skull, what it would look like. And one's got a little bow and one doesn't, and they're super cute. But so it's always been important to me, but it didn't it was a surprise to me how important having those places, being one of those places was for people especially here, is a very conservative area. Having a place like that was.
And it is really important because art kind of has always been at the forefront for helping lead the change in people's thought processes. And this is something where we really are trying to change the way people are thinking and perceiving these young people and allowing them to live their best life. And having that space must have been so good for some of them because, and me and my husband were talking about this just the other day. Like our child's lucky because, not to say I don't care, but I don't care what they dress like. I don't
Mhm.
care. I care that they're happy, that they're healthy, that they're educated, that they have goals and achievements. That's the stuff I care about. I don't care
Yep.
about what they look like or the friends they have, like that's their stuff.
Yep.
For these children who don't have the ability to be themselves at home, having that place where they can come and express who they are is
Yeah.
so integral to them.
And that should be everywhere, and it's not, and that's most unfortunate. And you're right, because art does move the conversation forward. Art and artists, I mean, look at how much it's so bizarre to me that when they pick and choose. Because I mean, look at Prince. Prince is like regarded as one of the best guitar players to have ever existed, and yet completely androgynous, completely like gender fluid, and this was totally acceptable. Freddie Mercury is another example of somebody who was like nobody. I always say this as a question. Nobody saw that. Like you're telling me in the early '80s, nobody figured that out before he kind of publicly announced it. You know what I mean? And even when he did, it wasn't the end of Queen. It wasn't like they were all ripped off of the airways and nobody ever played them again. And yet we're seeing Bud Light losing billions of dollars in sales because they sent one advertising thing to a trans person. It's so baffling to me. Um,
It is. It's a very. It's what they can do for you though. Like Queen made a lot of money. They were very very popular.
yep.
People are willing to turn a blind eye when it suits their prerogatives, which is such a sad thing, really.
And that kind of in a roundabout way, not that I want to sound like I'm monetizing anything because I'm not, is how I ended up kind of meeting Patrick John Mills, who one of the artists that I'm doing the show with, the You Will Be Offended show that's in
Yes,
Windsor right now.
the painter.
And yes, and his series called the Malignant series is all based on him um, being being diagnosed with cancer, with lymphoma. And there's such strong and powerful pieces, and we had multiple ones in the gallery. Um, but it was a hard sell because people were like, "That's a very, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, and but do I want that hanging in my living room over me every day? Do I want to spend the cost to put that in my house?" And to me, I was like, how do you not? How do you, like, if you have the money and you're that attached to it? Do you know what I mean? Like that's living. Like looking at a painting like that connects to you in such a profound way. That doesn't happen every day. How many pieces of art, how many paintings do you walk past every day that you're just like, yeah, uh, or people? And so him and I were discussing um, basically that, along with kind of the negative press that I received from Country Living magazine when I posted when they posted my figurines. Don't ask me why. I appreciate it, but don't ask me why Country Living posted it to a bunch of people who were outraged
Oh,
at what was happening to their precious pieces, like I had gone into their house and stolen them. So Um,
Jeez.
but really is realistically what I was doing was I was taking away their safe spaces. I was because there's a lot of people who kind of come to me now and say, I can't go to a thrift shop. It took me a little bit to figure this out, but there was a lot of people who came to me and were like, I can't go to a thrift shop. I can't go to my mom's house and look at those things and not think about what you would do to them. Right. And it was like, okay, I'm very flattered. That's very kind of you. That's very funny. And I appreciate that. And they were like, I want to sneak a piece in and see if she'll even notice, those sorts of things. And I'm like, yeah, no, you might want to warn her before you go doing something like that. But it dawned on me when I was getting all this hate mail is that if that's the impression I'm leaving on people who aren't collectors of precious moments, then all these
Yeah.
people who've spent thousands of dollars buying these things, what if they're now looking at their own collections and every time they do, they're thinking about me? You
Yeah,
know?
and
And
thinking about what he
it's
yep.
and I'm like, but that's good because you are this collection that you have is your safe space. This is your perfect world. And the world isn't this.
No.
The world is so far away removed from this. So the You Will Be Offended show, there's 15 pieces in that one, and that some of them, like the Freddie Mercury one, the Samuel L. Jackson piece, are a bit pop culture-y.
Which I love because Pulp Fiction is my favorite movie. So
Well, there's more Pulp Fiction references coming up. I have this one here, which is going to be the the two of them with the briefcase.
yeah, it's gonna be good.
So that one's a work in progress. Um, but so there's a couple pop culture pieces, but what I really wanted to focus on was communicating to these people that were using these figurines as escapism as to some of the things that are happening. So they're not listening to the news when they're telling them, or they're listening to the wrong news when they're telling them these things, or they're listening to something. Um, they're basically, anytime they're faced with something that they don't like, they put the blinders on and then they go home and they look at their collection and they're like, this is my safe space, this is my happy space. So I wanted to try and educate on not educate isn't even the right word, but I wanted to introduce some of the problems of the world that are going on right now through a medium that they normally use to um,
Escape the world.
escape. Exactly. So they're like this You Will Be Offended show. I use it as a medium, and I do this quite frequently to get some of these burning issues really off of my chest and out into these pieces. So I have a piece about gun control. I have a piece about 10 years ago, we wouldn't have even batted an eye if somebody that we were attracted to, we didn't necessarily agree with them politically.
Yep.
But in the last 10 years,
Oh
could
yeah,
you
the
could you
disparities and
honestly and truly sit across the room with somebody who, like, politics becomes so polarized that it's like, I not only, I could oversee you being like, "Oh, I wanna be this because they're this," but it's like now politics is so polarized, it's like I can't. Because even if I believe in some of the things that they're doing, the things that I disagree with what they're doing are so wrong to me and so upsetting and so backwards that I can't sit here and let you try and justify that to me. I had a friend, somebody, um, who tried to tell me who tried to validate somebody who used the word eradication in a sentence with trans people. And he was like, if you actually listen to this person, he's actually really smart in this and that. And I was like, no, I cannot listen to this person beyond that because he said that. And any person where that fits anywhere in their vocabulary or anywhere in their thought process is not somebody who's thinking clearly and valuing human life. Anyway, I digress a bit. But um, these pieces, so there's like gun control, there's RVW is in there. We just sold a piece. I sold the piece last night. That
The
was based
house
on,
heating one with the furnace and the
yep, the
boat.
house
That
heating
I
one. You know,
the abortion one, the my body.
that's the RVW, the Roe versus Wade one, where it's like all these laws, and it's not, you know what, it's not even just, sorry, we're losing our track and we're getting into politics and stuff like that. So maybe I should digress. But
Well, I
the
did want to
point,
ask you a little bit, but yeah,
these pieces were my emotions. These pieces were the things that I struggle so much explaining with words because my mind races with ADHD, because of my struggles with vocabulary or even just social interaction. I have a hard time getting my message across without sounding pushy or emphatic or upsetting or upset, but allowing myself to put that into a piece and allowing the piece to speak for itself and allowing people to interpret that piece for themselves was extremely therapeutic and extremely solid. And it starts conversations, and that's where we, like, you, this is again a long story roundabout way of going back to art moves the conversation forward. I didn't make these pieces specifically calling out one political side or the other, but
yeah,
simply drawing the the attention to the fact that it it's a part of the conversation when you're going, do I love this person? Can I love this person? Can I spend the rest of my life with this person if I don't agree with them politically?
yeah, and that's something that's very hard. If you don't agree with the ideology of the other person, it's really hard to build a relationship of an intimate relationship on that foundation.
How do
But
you
I
raise
want
children with that?
that's you can have the same, like, me and my husband have a lot of the same values and morals. And when the boys were little, we still struggled with how you want to present these themes and how you want them, what you want to take away, what you want them to take away from their lives. But
How
I
do you
wanted to
pull
ask,
out discipline, and then how do you, yeah.
but I wanted to ask you, do you normally, because usually they're kind of like a mix, but these last few, there's been a lot of the political ones. Is this specifically for the um this show, the You Will Be Offended show, or is it something that you do kind of like regularly?
I would say it's it's hard because sometimes I just want to be fun. Sometimes a piece just jumps out at me and it's like, oh, okay, this is quirky and weird. Or it's one of those dated references that pops into my head that nobody understands. But I'm gonna put it into this piece because maybe people will just think I'm super weird. I've done some pretty off the wall pieces that don't make a whole lot of sense. Some just I'll just start. I won't even have an idea. I'll just start building it, and it will grow and manifest and turn itself into something. Um, Sometimes they definitely come from raw emotions. I did one piece that was um, when I completed it, I was like, oof. I was like, I don't even know if I want to release this. I don't even know if I want to put this out to the public, release it publicly, because it was a nurse with a needle and she was going to be giving, the bear is on a stool and she's going to give it a shot. And the bear had broken off. So the stool was gone, the bear was gone. So it was just the nurse sitting there with a giant needle. So I put a heroin kit on the ground and basically researched what a heroin addict looks like. and
Okay.
sculpted the face, and it
Oh,
came
wow.
out like eerily accurate. Like I had people contacting me going, I lost friends to heroin, and this piece is bang on. And I'm like, ugh. And I struggled for a very long time, but I did put it out because I thought it was important. Because I thought even those negative feelings, even those hurt feelings, maybe it'll connect with somebody. And the person who ended up actually purchasing it was an anti-drug person who was using it as their display. And I was like, oh, okay, nature finds its way, right? I'm glad it's going to somebody who's not like, haha, people who die from heroin are hilarious. It went to somebody who was using it to educate, right?
Yeah.
And that meant a lot to me. But yeah, some pieces are very emotional for me, and then other pieces are just wacky and weird, and just how far can I push the limits? I do like to laugh. I do like to have
Oh, I think
uh,
everyone likes to laugh.
people people like the if I need a boost, if I need an emotional boost, oftentimes I'll do something morose because those are the ones that people find the funniest and the most accurate. And I think it's not because they want to see these things. They are still children, like if you think about it, all these figurines are still children. So I have my rules. I don't do sex and I don't do bathroom humor, except for conjunctivitis. Um but for some reason people find, I think what it is taking something that's so pure as to what they made it originally and flipping it on its ear, and people going through that shock value of seeing the before and the after that they love. So when I want to get a personal boost, a dopamine fix, I will make something that's particularly gruesome because people are like, that's funny. That's like seeing that from that is very funny to me. And I tend to get the most responses, the most shares, the most comments, whether they're positive or negative. The negative comments, I just use them as testimonials, but um, come see the piece that made Susan in Iowa say, I hope his wife sleeps with a brick under her pillow. Um, True comment, by the way. Uh,
Seriously?
Oh yeah. I hope the neighbors keep their dogs in their pets and their kids indoors when he's around. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I told you, bad press, but very funny still at the same time. Um, but yeah, those ones are the ones that get people to come out and say, "This is hilarious. This is funny. I really like what you're doing here." Or it's funny to see something that's supposed to be so sweet be so gross. So yeah, it's again, long story short, I warned you I ramble. It's not necessarily always about political motivation or feelings. Sometimes it's just wacky and weird. The one that the one that really blew up was a girl with a pair of scissors was holding a snowflake that had the year on it. So I put her face on the snowflake, and I put a skeleton face like on her face, like she had cut her own face off and was holding it up to display. And it's super dark and super, and that was the one that was on the cover of all the articles that were going around when we went viral. And I was like, okay, no, I appreciate that that one turned out really, really well and was really, really funny, but I don't want everybody to think that I'm just this complete sadist either. That I have, that there is some cleverness to some of the things that I do. And then when COVID came around, I changed the title of that one to someone touched my face today. So
I I have to ask, what inspires you? Like,
what?
'cause some of your stuff's a little creepy, but I'm sure you're not inspired by necessarily creepy things.
No, I don't know. I get asked this a lot. Some pieces just jump out at you, and they're just like, this is what needs to be done. And then there's other pieces. So I have like 500 precious moments pieces that haven't been altered yet because people donated them to me or I picked them up as like collections or what have you. And I'll look at a piece and I'll be like, I don't know, I got nothing. I can't think of anything. And I'll go through cycles and I'll put that piece and I'll grab another one that does jump out at me. And then I'll keep going back. And then one day I'll be sitting at work or I'll be in the shower or I'll be doing something and I'll be like, you're about to fall asleep and you're like, oh, I got to sit up and write this down because I know what I'm going to do with that piece now. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what inspires me. Some people would probably tell you it was Satan, but but it's not. I don't hear voices. I'm not crazy. I don't know. I
No.
think, like you said, it's just about keeping the conversation going. It's about doing things that people haven't seen before. What inspires me to keep going are the nice comments that I get where people are like, I shared these pieces around the office today and we sat like as a group, we sat around and killed ourselves laughing for like 20 minutes. That people are like, I so look forward to opening my Instagram and seeing a new piece from you and those sorts of things because people get it. It's not actually that somebody wants to go out and cut their face off. It's not that people want to go out and do these terrible things. They just sometimes want to break from being force
Mundane.
fed banal art, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. I do want to ask because I asked every one of my artists, and I don't want to forget. Excuse me. So, what would you say to someone like to an emerging artist? So, if someone wanted to kind of follow in your footsteps, what would you tell them?
Make art for you.
Pardon?
Don't make art for you. Don't When you start getting caught up in will this piece sell? In is this going to be popular? Am I going to get likes? Um, then you're never going to be satisfied because it will never be enough likes. When you end up having to sell it, you're like, I need to put a price on it. If somebody wants to buy it, they're going to be like, oh, maybe they'll be like, oh, well, that's too much. And you're going to put pressure on yourself. If it doesn't sell in the first 2 days that you listed it, you're going to feel like it was a failure. So the one thing that I always try and tell people, the first thing I try and tell people when they come and say, what should I make? What should I do? Is make art for yourself. Because if you make a piece for yourself and it doesn't work, then you just burn it, throw it away, or start over. If you make a really cool piece of art and you love it, then you don't have qualms about saying, this is how much it's going to take to pry it out of my cold dead hands. You don't need to worry about, um, you tend to worry less about um, how much did the materials cost? How many hours did I spend doing it? How much is my time worth? Do I need to factor in all the shows that I've dragged this painting, picture, sculpture around to into the price? Why isn't it selling? Do I need to drop my price to make it more appealing to people? Uh, you lose all that because you've made a really cool piece of art for yourself, and if it doesn't sell, you don't care because you made it for you and you can just take it home and put it back in your house where you wanted it to be in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And when you're making art for yourself, that's when you will put pieces of yourself into your art, right? When you're making it for someone else, when you're thinking about that assembly line kind of process, when you're thinking about all those things, the art loses something.
Hmm.
You can see the pieces that people are like, I painted 6 of these today, and you can see Now, I don't want to take away from people who are extremely talented and extremely skilled and can produce things at a high rate or fast or developed a system or a style that doesn't take a lot of man hours or time or effort. Um, I don't want to take anything away from those people. Um, there are some amazing people out there, but when you look at a piece that's been like produced for, I needed to make 12 pieces. Now I'm calling myself out because I had to make those pieces for that show. But if you're making pieces where you're like, I have a show coming up and I need to make 10 paintings, so I'm just going to go and fire through them and hang them all up and put price tags on them and hope they sell, as opposed to if you're like, I'm going to have a show in a year and I'm going to make sure that the 10 paintings that I'm working on are about me and how I feel. And I'm only going to work on them at times when I'm feeling connected to the art, not when I'm pushing myself. Um, then that art grows. And you can see the one thing that I learned from running the gallery for the last 2.5 years is that people notice. They do notice. They can see the ones that were thrown together and they stop and they admire the pieces that have a story to tell, that have, and even as a gallery owner, when people are asking me about a piece and the artists have come in and somebody was just like, it was a Saturday afternoon and I made these 3 pieces, as opposed to somebody who was like, I'd had a really shitty day that day, and I came home and I didn't want to talk to anybody, and I had half a bottle of wine and was feeling inspired, and I went in and I just, not that alcohol or drugs should be your motivation, but you were just like, I was, that's how lousy I was feeling, and I was just like, got to an emotional point where it was like, I need to get this out of me or I'm going to explode. Those are the pieces. People want stories behind their art. People want to know. Even abstract art that doesn't look like anything, people can make abstract art and go, it's abstract art. It doesn't have to look like anything. But there are also people who make abstract art who go, this is my rage. This is love to me. This is like, I was feeling so euphoric this day. And these were the colors that were jumping out of the trays at me. And this is where they wanted to go. And this is where my brush guided me. And those stories connect with people who want to purchase the art and connect with the artist. Um, as opposed to pieces where they're like, well, I heard purple and blue was really popular right now. So I painted an abstract painting using purple and blues.
Yep. And it is, I say it's an energy or a feeling.
Yes,
Sometimes you look at something and you can literally feel that energy. Like I feel like that's where art really is the defining factor in a lot of conversations because if you can't articulate what you're trying to say with words, sometimes you can actually manipulate the materials in such a way that those words that can't be spoken come through.
absolutely. Yep. Now I paint with firecrackers. I paint abstract painting using firecrackers, and it's chaos, and I have no control. There's no brushes involved. It's just chaos essentially. But the point of it is not just to say, oh, I just wanted to blow some stuff up. The point of it is that I my need to control things. I paint with firecrackers because it's noisy and I hate noise, and it's messy and I hate mess, and it's chaos when I crave control. So the reason I paint with firecrackers is because it forces me to enter an uncomfortable space to create. It allows me to be emotional, to so I would set off a firecracker and it would spatter the paint. And then I have to look at the painting and go, I didn't have any control where any of this went. Now, based on what it did, I have to think about what I want to do next. And it's kind of like symbolism of life. Like to me, I didn't anticipate this thing that happened to me at work today that blew up in my face, and it forced me to be uncomfortable, take a step back, look at the mess that it created, and say, how do I proceed from here? And that's what painting with firecrackers means to me. Is it's examples of putting myself, so when I do that, it helps me treat when those issues happen at work or they happen in public, that I can go, okay, this just happened. Here's the chaos it created. I'm taking a step back and taking a deep breath and observing what's in front of me and saying, what's my best step forward here? And
And trying
since
to
I've
find
been
the
doing
order.
that, it really helps me with my social anxiety now, because I find myself, I don't react. I pause, I take a deep breath. I think people think I'm ignoring them or I'm staring a hole through them. And it's just me taking that time to absorb what they're telling me, or looking at it and saying, this person is being very toxic to me right now. Is it because I did something wrong? Is there something that happened to this person prior to them running into me today? Before I make my reaction back to them, I'm looking at it going, how do I need to respond to this to create the best outcome? Does that make sense?
Yep, yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
So,
Um, I'm more of a react immediately and then afterwards have all this stuff going through my head.
yep,
And then that's where, that's why I love art so much, is because it helps me kind of tame those rotating thoughts.
exactly. And it's, yeah, I've had so many more meaningful conversations with people when I don't just knee jerk reaction to something that happens. And I consider, maybe this person had a death in the family recently and they're very emotional. Maybe they just were almost hit by a car crossing the street coming in here and they're in a fight and flight state, and it's got nothing to do with me, right? But our own personal
Yep.
worlds, we're constantly thinking like, this
Well,
person's
everyone
coming
is
into my
selfish,
space and
really.
just causing shit to cause shit for me, and I'm gonna punch them in the face. And it's like, no, just relax, take a minute.
But it is true, though. We are all selfish, really, because we have to be. We are self-preserving people. I
Hmm.
have a history, like I have a background in social work, and learning about the different lenses and how other people perceive the world around them really helps you understand kind of why people are doing this and why people are doing that. Like everyone has a story, and those different experiences they have dictate how they behave. But it's really hard when you're in that situation to kind of step back and be empathetic about it.
And it gets harder every day, and that's, the media doesn't give you time to digest something before it's moved on to the next catastrophe.
Yeah.
And it gets harder every day, and it's up to each and every one of us, and that's where art comes into it, right? To remember that that there's more to this than just the finished product. It's like, how did they get
Yeah.
there? You know? Yeah, and art is so hugely important in all of that. And we need more art. We need more artists. We need more art teachers. We need more art programs.
I completely agree. You will not find an opposer here. That's that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, is because I really love not just the art, but the stories behind it. Like
Yeah,
um, what causes people to create? Why do people create? Because it's always a very personal thing. There's always something very innate that people find in art that they don't find anywhere else.
I
Um,
would say I would say in the last 2 years, I've made more friends and more connections. And I'm talking like serious and solid friends and connections than I've made in the last 20 years. And it's because art is that gateway, that opening into something personal, of sharing something personal with another person. and 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 having that connection with another person. And connection is so hard to find nowadays. Finding that
It is.
connection.
And
Uh,
especially in our digital world, like we were talking about all of that digitization that's happened in society recently, and a lot of that removal of the face to face
yeah,
has changed the way we interact with people. It's changed the way we interact with ourselves. And art is kind of like an antidote to that. It helps us process emotions and see others' emotions in a way that we may not have ever even understood otherwise.
but it's even art has become, you know, like there's there's a whole, and people are entitled to it, right? There's a whole demographic, there's a whole group of people that are totally content with buying IKEA art and
Yeah,
what people call hotel art, which is just like, I don't want art to make me feel something. I just want it to match the rest of the decor in my house.
yeah,
And that to me is marketing. That's part of the I have a friend, Diane Woodward, who says beige will kill you. Um, that's
page
her.
will kill you.
That's kind of her go-to is beige will kill you. And her house. Look up Diane Woodward because she is one of the most colorful, most vibrant
I have, and her stuff is
creators,
gorgeous.
and her personality matches 110%. She is bigger than life, and she's fearless. And you can easily go wrong with that kind of color usage, but she pulls it together, and it's because it's who she is. And it's life. So I mean, there are people out there who will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's people who hire other people to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on art for them because they're like, I don't even know what's in or what's popular or whatever, but I want people to think that I know what's in or what's popular, or I want to invest in art so that I can get my money back from it someday or something like that. And that's just
Yeah.
all that's to me. I'm not saying it's wrong for the entire universe, but to me it's art for all the wrong reasons.
Well, art is, you know, it's to me, art is an expression of your person. And
Mhm.
I believe that art creates a connection of not really the soul, but like I said, art, well done, loved art creates an energy in its presence. Just being around that art, people pick up on the emotions and it kind of projects something into the world. Like you take something from yourself and you're able to create it in such a way that it's able to project into others and into the world. Like I agree, the hotel art is a little passe, I guess.
I just
But
learned about yacht rock today, and I was like, what the shit is yacht rock? And then I listened to it and I was like, oh, I know what yacht rock is, and I know why I've never heard the term yacht rock before. But it's it's that's the same way with art. There's gonna be people who are like, oh, I love this and I don't love this. And to me, like in my house, the art is very eclectic because it's like I don't think about, well, is this going to go with the other art pieces I have in my house? I'm like, no, I like this piece. It connects with me. I want to support this artist, so I'm going to purchase this piece. So it's my house is chaos. My house is chaos, anyways, but the art doesn't, there's no flow. There's no, this matches this, goes with this, goes to this. It would probably give a lot of people a heart attack or a headache at the very least. But you,
I'm
you,
I'm
you like what you like.
yeah. I'm the same way. Pretty much everything I have in my house, I know the person who's made it. Like
Yeah.
pretty much everything I have, and it all I feel like it it gives me the feels, I guess.
Yeah, no,
But
absolutely. And that's what your house should be filled with is feelings, is good feelings, tough feelings, emotions, things that you full of places, not just where it's just one safe, calm feeling, but it's like I'm feeling anxious, so I'm gonna seek out this painting because this is where I go when I'm anxious, or this is where I go when I'm sad. I go when I look at this piece and it cheers me up. Um, I was in a shop one day. It was an antique mall, and I was minding my own business. And these two women were standing there, and one of them was like, "Oh, I would really like to start collecting art, and but I don't know anything about it." And then she was like this painting here, like, is that worth that much? I don't know. And I had to stop and go, "Do you like that painting?" And they were like, "What?" And I said, "Do you like that painting?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's all right, I guess." I said, "Do you feel like it's worth that amount?" No, I don't think so. Then it's not worth that amount. That's
mm,
all there is. That's all you need to know about art is, do you like it? Do you feel like it's fair value for its money? Those are the only two questions you need to ask yourself. You don't need other people to justify art for you. You don't need other people to tell you what your art taste is worth. Or
yeah.
when people there was one artist who was in our gallery who was like, I was talking to one of the major galleries in the area, and they were all on board with what I was doing until they found out I didn't have a post-secondary degree. And then they just cut me off like completely. They were like, "We can't showcase your work here," and just cut him off. And he was like, "So I'm showing with you because you were the first person that was just like, I really like this. I think it's really cool, and it's something that I want to have in my space." So he's like, and I was like, "That's the most ridiculous thing to me, that somebody is like, you don't have that piece of paper that says you spent X amount of money, therefore I can't be interested in your work."
That's so crazy to me. But you know, you find these kind of juxtapositions all the time in life. Um, and it's really sad because art should come from the heart. It doesn't matter if you're educated or not.
Yeah. There are some amazing, I've said this many times to people, but there are some people who are so incredibly talented, and all they paint is the exact same thing, the vase of flowers, that it's like, you are like, that portrait of that person couldn't be any more bang on. I would swear it's a photograph. I would this and that and the other thing. I think it's absolutely stunning, but they don't have imagination. They have to take what's there and reproduce it. And they have all the skills in the world. And then there are people who have no skill. Well, I don't want to say no skill, but they have that drive. They have that desire. They were like, I have to create, I have to build something. And I would get pieces in, and people would be like, why is this? And it was like, because of the idea, because of the concept, because of what drove that person to create that piece is what makes that piece so special and amazing to me. So, yes, there are some obvious design flaws in it, but I can look past that in the same way that I can watch a movie that's very poorly acted but really well written, but I can't watch a movie that's really poorly written but really well acted.
I agree. I agree 100% there.
So,
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate you being on here and sharing your story and your art with us. Um, Anybody interested in the You Will Be Offended show can see you. Can you tell us where they can see you until June 10th?
sure, that's at Live. So it's called the Art Factory. It's in Renfrew, Ontario. I know that's a bit out of the way for a lot of people. Um, if you want to see the pieces that we had in that show, but you can't make it to Renfrew, I'm currently posting them on my Instagram account, which is at Precious Mutator. Um, I'm also on Facebook as Precious Mutations. I recently opened a TikTok account, so if anybody wants to join follow me along. I think on TikTok, because I like to make it complicated. I believe I'm the Nick Romancer on TikTok. Um, but yeah, these are all places that I share my work whenever I create new pieces. But the You Will Be Offended show will be showing during Art Factory hours, which is Wednesday to Saturday, 10 to 5 in Renfrew, Ontario, until June
And
10th.
you'll be able to follow the links in the description to reach all of Keith's stuff, which is just phenomenal. Like me and my husband love watching your Precious Mutations. I love seeing them come in. I'm always excited for the new one, what's coming. I guess I just like the idea of picking your brain.
Yeah, for sure. No, I really appreciate you having me on, and I really appreciate that you're putting shows like this together that help promote artists, especially in Canada. I think it's a little bit difficult to get notoriety unless you're doing group of seven stuff. So reaching out and doing fringe artists and doing what you're doing is super important. So thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Keith. Yeah, if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Bye, my lovelies.
See you later. Thanks so much.